Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And back with you stateside, thanks be to God, back in my home state of Michigan, metropolitan Detroit, doing the show for you live from here every day now for the next 2 months before we head back, God willing, to the motherland. We have 2 pilgrimages coming up in the fall, one for wine, women in the new evangelization with myself and Kelly Walquist, the founders of that beautiful ministry. And then Deacon Dom and I have a sold out, both trips are sold out actually, couples trip, celebrating marriage at the Saints of Umbria with Julie and Greg Alexander and Father Frankie Ciceros. We're excited about that as well, but excited to be back in our country. Thanks be to God for the United States of America. It was kind of cool, though, when we got back and we were catching up on what was happening with Wimbledon because, of course, there was an Italian young man, amazing tennis player, who actually met with the Pope. There's a cute story of him, remember, a while back meeting with the new Pope. And he won. So he's the first Italian man to win the prestigious Wimbledon competition. And Jannik Sinner is actually from northern Italy. And I looked it up. And it is a town, let me see if I can find it now, San Candido, which is very close to the Austrian border. I guess that is a good way to explain the name because it doesn't sound very Italian, with the vowels in it. But it's a very cool story of his friendship with his competition in terms of the young man whom he beat in the competition. But I just thought I would mention that because it was kind of neat. We were excited for him, being of course, Italian-American heritage, both my husband and I. So there's a neat story that Alatia did on the friendship between the two, which is very cool. So maybe we'll talk about that sometime this week. In the meantime, I want to thank Tom Price for sitting in for Richard. Richard Jesse has a day off today, my wonderful producer. We have a great lineup for you. Very excited about it. Coming up in the first hour, of course, we have our wonderful friend. We have, of course, Matt Swaim from the Sunrise Morning Show is going to be joining us this morning to talk all about what's going on in terms of the journey home. Highlights from the journey home. We do that actually every single time. Every Monday we have, of course, Matt on with us. And a lot of interesting stories that we're going to be covering for you this morning, so we want to make sure you stay tuned for that. Also, I did want to mention, too, that in the second hour of the program, just briefly, I'll go into more detail, but we are going to be giving you an update on the Texas situation, the flooding, because apparently there are more things to worry about now with the weather. That is what the governor of Texas, Abbott, said. So that's a real concern for him. Weather-wise, though, let's take a look at the forecast. We have some heavy rain for the Mid-Atlantic, heat and wildfire concerns to the west. Slow-moving showers and thunderstorms may result in flash flooding for portions of the Mid-Atlantic region today into tonight. Meanwhile, excessive heat will continue to build across the west through Tuesday. Heat advisories and extreme heat warnings are in effect. And then fire weather concerns for the interior northwest with dry and breezy conditions. And they're also watching the tropics across the southeast. So, again, there is some concerns for more bad weather down in Texas. And I just can't believe this in terms of what's happening with all of that there. It's just so sad to me. And we're actually going to be doing a follow-up story on it in the second hour as well, so just keep that in mind. I did want to mention we're getting a lot of, I mentioned this on the Sunrise Morning Show this morning, we are getting a lot of calls and a lot of different emails regarding registering for the canonization of Carlo Acutis and Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. Now, that is coming up in September 7th. So the best thing to do if you're going on your own is to keep an eye on the Vatican website, and they will have updates on there. The Vatican website has actually been remodeled, so it's a lot easier to navigate. And then the big tip that I have for that, though, since we're getting a lot of different requests, is to check out your own diocese, because there are several dioceses that are already doing trips. Some are doing short trips, some are doing longer trips. It's really the best to do that through an organized manner because you know for sure you're going to get in, you're going to be with your local bishop, you're going to have someone there officially for you. So that's just a little bit of a suggestion from yours truly. All right, we have to get to the news. There's a lot of it this morning on a Monday. It is July 14th, 2025. So let's get started with the latest information here on EWTN. Well, rain is bringing more flooding to central Texas, still reeling from the deadly 4th of July weekend floods that killed around 130 people. Governor Greg Abbott said water rescues were carried out yesterday in at least 3 counties, and some communities were already under evacuation orders. In Kerrville, which saw massive devastation in the earlier flooding, water has seen rushing over the city streets. Again, a flood watch is in effect for much of the region until 9 a.m. this morning. Meanwhile, search and recovery crews are still working in that area where more than 160 people remain unaccounted for. Dale Hammond traveled all the way from Ohio down to the Lone Star State to offer his assistance.
Because of the amount of kids that were lost, we felt the need to come down and do our part. This is Americans helping other Americans, is what it's all about.
Officials again putting the death toll at nearly 130, with most of those fatalities in Kerr County. The hard-hit county, again, as we mentioned, is still under flood watches. And although the threat of heavy rain is minor at this point, those fears are real that even small amounts of rain could trigger more flooding. In other news this morning, authorities say several people are dead and a number of others are hurt following a fire last night at a Massachusetts assisted living facility. Fall River Mayor Paul Coogan, who was at the scene, says emergency personnel had to act quickly.
It's a terrible tragedy for the family and the residents, and the fire department, the police, the EMS, everybody did a 5-star job, doing their best they could to rescue as many people.
Officials say 5 firefighters were also hurt. They suffered minor injuries. A mass casualty event was called soon after the fire at Gaber House was reported. Arriving crews found patients hanging from windows screaming for help. The cause of the fire, though, is still under investigation. Pope Leo giving comforting reminders of God's healing and love during Mass at the papal parish of St. Thomas of Villanova in Castle Gandolfo, where he's staying for a summer vacation, as he reflected on the parable of the Good Samaritan. The parish of Castle Gandolfo enjoying Pope Leo's Mass, of course. He began by expressing his joy of celebrating the Eucharist with them, greeting all those present. He then recalled how in Sunday's Gospel, according to St. Luke, we hear one of our Lord's most beautiful and moving parables, that of the Good Samaritan, a parable that he acknowledged constantly challenges us to think about our own lives. Troubles our dormant or distracted consciences and warns us about the risk of a complacent faith that is satisfied with the outward observance of the law, but incapable of feeling and acting with the same merciful compassion as God. The parable, Pope Leo said, is really about compassion. Telling the faithful how we look at others is what counts, because it shows what's in our hearts. And following the catechesis of the Sunday Angelus, the Holy Father calling on everyone to pray for peace and to remember all who are suffering due to violence and war and those who find themselves in need. The words echoing what he had expressed earlier in his homily during the Mass, over which he presided on Sunday morning at the parish of St. Thomas of Villanova, when he spoke about the wounded man in the parable again of the Good Samaritan and how violence and poverty destroyed dreams and lives. A federal judge ruling that a Catholic flight attendant who says United Airlines fired him after he endorsed Catholic teachings while talking with a coworker can proceed. He can proceed with his lawsuit against his union for not standing up for him. The flight attendant, Ruben Sanchez of Anchorage, Alaska, claiming the airlines, according to Catholic news agency, investigated his extensive social media posts only after receiving what he describes as baseless accusations arising from a red-eye flight conversation in May of 2023. He claims that when the company came up with nothing that violated its social media policy, they went ahead and fired him anyway. He filed a lawsuit in January of this year against United and the union he belongs to while working for the airline, the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, in U.S. District Court for the Central District of California. President Trump says Americans are already seeing the benefits of the BBB, or Big Beautiful Bill. In an interview with Fox News, the president claiming the legislation has already spurred unprecedented investment in the U.S.
And remember this, the Democrats wanted to vote for it, most of them, many of them, because it's all good stuff. I mean, it's all lower taxes and incentives and this, that, so many good things.
He went on to say car companies are building plants in the U.S. and AI firms are investing trillions, he said, of dollars as a result of the measure. Trump insisting the legislation provides major tax cuts and makes sure Americans aren't taxed on tips, overtime, or Social Security. Meanwhile, the president says the U.S. will be sending Patriot missiles to Ukraine. Speaking yesterday, Trump continued to talk about his disappointment with Russian President Putin, saying he surprised a lot of people by talking nicely and then bombing everyone at night. He went on to add that an exact number has not been agreed to, but that Ukraine needs it for protection and that the European Union is paying for it. Trump is set to meet with the NATO Secretary General at the White House, and that will happen later today. And the Trump administration is planning to appeal a judge's order halting certain efforts used during federal immigration raids in Southern California. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem confirming the appeal during an interview yesterday with NBC's Meet the Press.
This judge is ridiculous, and the fact that he put forward a decision like this, we will appeal it and we will win it.
The order issued on Friday applies to several counties, including Los Angeles and Ventura counties. The judge citing the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, which protects individuals from unreasonable searches and seizures. The White House says it's a gross overstep of judicial authority to be corrected on appeal. It also says no federal judge has the authority to dictate immigration policy. Meanwhile, the border czar, Tom Homan, is speaking out after a federal judge ordered that halt to immigration raids in Los Angeles. He appeared on CNN's State of the Union, saying the judge is definitely overstepping the authority.
I don't think any federal judge can dictate immigration policy. That's a matter for Congress and for the president, and I know the Department of Justice is going to litigate it, so we're going to take it to the appeals court.
The order bars agents from relying on race, language spoken, type of work, or location when detaining suspects. Andrew Cuomo is now expected to stay in the New York City mayoral race, this time as an independent. Sources telling News Nation that New York's former governor will make the announcement sometime this week. However, the report indicates he plans to ask all candidates other than Zohran Mamdani to promise to leave the race mid-September if they are not in the lead, himself included. Not every candidate is receptive to that idea, including incumbent Mayor Eric Adams, whose campaign put out a statement saying, in the part, people spoke loudly when Mamdani defeated Cuomo by double digits in the primary. Daniel Martindale tells us a Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is missing an assault-style rifle and 150 rounds of ammunition.
The LASD believes the department-issued weapon and ammo fell out of the trunk of a patrol vehicle in South LA. It happened on Saturday night in the 10 o'clock hour while deputies were responding to a call for service. Deputies retraced the patrol vehicle's route for 4 miles, but could not find the weapon, which was inside a storage case. I'm Daniel Martindale.
Hall of Fame quarterback John Elway will not be facing criminal charges in connection with the death of his longtime friend and business partner. Riverside County, California Sheriff Chad Bianco says investigators found nothing criminal, and the death is considered to have been a tragic accident. Jeffrey Spurbeck died back in April after falling out of a golf cart Elway was driving while at the Stagecoach Country Music Festival. And there's a new study that finds 19% of food and drinks in our country have synthetic food dyes in them. Researchers at the Georgia Institute for Global Health, University of North Carolina, and the Center for Science and the Public Interest evaluating ingredient data for packaged foods and beverages made by the top 25 U.S. food manufacturers. The researchers found the average sugar content of products with synthetic dyes was 141% more than those without dyes. Wow. It is a Monday morning. It's July 14th, and we're so happy you're with us here on EWTN's Catholic Connection. Good to be back stateside here across the pond. Flew back on Saturday, and the flight was very smooth, very crowded, but very smooth. And we even landed about an hour and a half early, which was super nice. Coming up, Journey Home Highlights with our friend Matt Swaim, host of the Sunrise Morning Show. What's coming up in the show tonight, he'll tell us. And then we are going to be talking about an amazing witness to the faith. That's coming up in the second part of our first hour of Catholic Connection on a Monday. We'll be right back. As we say in Radio Land, don't touch that dial. Minutes past the hour. Do hope your Monday is going well. July 14th, and every Monday, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, we check in with the one, the only Matt Swaim for highlights from the journey home. He's all about, of course, the Sunrise Morning Show and the journey home on EWTN. Hey, my friend, long time no talk to. What was it, like an hour and a half ago?
I know. It's always fun because every Monday morning at the top of our second hour, you're always there to join us for a little segment. And then we turn the tables and then you grill me for a couple minutes.
Yeah, but you know what? It's a good type of grilling because we're talking about all things good, all things God, and one of our most popular programs on the network. So, what's on the show tonight, my friend?
Yeah, so tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern on EWTN television, of course, simulcast on many of these EWTN radio affiliates. The Journey Home, which again is always every week we sit down, John Mark Grodi sits down with somebody and asks them their story. We get a married couple on tonight, which is always fun. Because whenever you have a couple on, Teresa, neither one of them can get away with anything because they have a fact checker sitting next to them.
So true.
It's like if Deacon Dom is sitting next to you on a Good News cruise, right? There's only so much you can get away with.
Exactly.
But Keith and Tammy Kaiser, and they run a camp in South Carolina. They actually run a Catholic school down there as well. But back in the 80s, they were at Grove City College, and they were training to be youth ministers. And they were in the Presbyterian world. And while they were training for youth ministry, they struck it up with another Presbyterian couple, good friends of theirs, who kind of took them under their wing. And in the course of this, those mentors began to study some early church stuff. And not so much the wife, but the husband got really into it. And eventually, later on, became Catholic. And this was actually a watershed moment in Keith and Tammy's own conversion that they later underwent, and they became Catholic themselves. But you got any ideas, any guesses as to who that Presbyterian mentor at Grove City College was? That
was it the Hans?
It was the Hans.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
So if you ever want to know more backstory on Scott and Kimberly and what it was like for their friends in the 80s to watch them go Catholic and think, well, what are we going to do? This is one of those stories.
Their journey, though, the Hans, if you read their book, which I love, Rome Sweet Home, it was a while before. It was tough for Kimberly. I mean, she struggled with it for some time.
Well, they go into a little bit of that because, they were there during the era when Scott was gung-ho and Kimberly was not, which was kind of a little bit of a way for them to reflect on their own journey and how they were thinking about, are we going to do this together? Is one of us going to run ahead? And this is actually a huge issue with the pastors and wives and really not just pastors, but even the lay people we deal with, where one person is gung-ho, is discovering things, light bulbs are going off everywhere, and the other spouse is like, what are you doing? I feel like I don't even know you anymore. So
that's what happened with me and Dom. He came back, with guns a-blazing, and I was
like, what are you, nuts?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I thought I was married. I don't know what was happening. He was so on fire, and he says this in our testimony, very much over the top, and really kind of like trying to push me back into the church. I wasn't anti-Catholic or anything. I just wasn't practicing anymore. I just, was not. I was living my life and thought everything was fine, and so it's important though. It's a good discussion to have because it's not only, for example, with people who are converts or reverts, but if you're in the faith and you're still identifying as Catholic, and maybe you're going to mass and whatnot, but you don't really have that relationship with the Lord. When one of the spouses really goes forward and really gets into their faith, you have to consider the other spouse and your marriage. I mean, you have to respect your marriage. So there's that. It's very, very sensitive. It's not an easy trail.
Well, Teresa, we used to experience this all the time, even in the evangelical churches I went to, where someone would have a born-again experience and their husband would still be at home watching football on Sundays thinking, well, my wife went crazy, now she's listening to all these talks and reading all these books. But, in the Catholic world, it's such a unique and sensitive thing because often what you have is a person who's on fire for the Catholic faith, but their spouse is on fire for the evangelical faith. So they're actually both on fire for the faith.
Right.
Except one of them is thinking, well, why isn't what I believe good enough? Why isn't Jesus good enough for you? Why do you have to go add all this unnecessary stuff on top of it? Which is what a lot of people think Catholics do, which of course we know it's not like that at all. It's more like if you love someone, you want everything in their world to be part of your world. Right.
So that's interesting. So did they have challenges with that in their marriage? Did they come back? Did they come into the church at the same time, the couple that's coming up tonight?
I can't remember exactly what the timeline is. I mean, they worked through it together big time. But one of the other things that was actually a challenge for their timeline is here they were training to be Protestant youth ministers, and in the evangelical world, Protestant youth ministry, it's like a huge thing. I mean, whole churches are built around youth ministries. You got youth ministry groups that are like 400 kids showing up on a Wednesday. At the Catholic world, it is not so much the case. My guess is that a lot of the people listening right now, their Catholic parishes, if they have youth ministry, it's run by a volunteer or a part-time person, and their youth announcements are on page 5C of the bulletin, So coming in and figuring out how is this going to work? How are we going to use these gifts where we feel what God was calling us to actually work with young people? What's that going to look like as Catholics? That was a big part of their story.
Wow. It's so exciting. So in terms of your guests, how do you pick? I know we've asked this question before, but do you time them? You think, well, this might be the best for this time of year? Or, how do you determine what goes on when?
I look at the list and I just smile and dial a lot. And a lot of people tell me no, and then sometimes things come back around. What's funny is that we haven't had the Kaisers on yet, and they've been Catholic for ages, and they're in the world of the people that we talk to all the time, right? They're friends with the Hans. They're friends with a whole bunch of people in South Carolina who are converts. But sometimes it's kind of fun to go back through and think, well, why have we never had these people on before? Let's get them on. Let's get them on.
Yeah, it's exciting.
And
South Carolina has a lot going on with the Catholic faith. A lot going on.
Joseph
I've spoken down there
Pierce
many times.
is a Catholic convert down there. Father Longenecker is a Catholic convert down there. There's a gazillion. Steve Woods down there.
Yep. It's a big, very active area. I've spoken at a number of different events, including a women's conference there too. So they've got a lot of really good activity going on. You mentioned that the husband started looking because of what Scott was doing at the early church. You and I were talking about that this morning on your show, the Sunrise Morning Show. That when you go to Italy, you see the early church, and that's what triggers a lot of people. If you remember Alex Jones, or Deacon Alex Jones,
yes.
who passed away several years ago, what a loss that was to us here in Metro Detroit. But he took his congregation, several people, to study with him at Sacred Heart Major Seminary, looking at the early church fathers, and then put a fork in them. He was done. That was it.
Yeah.
Because if you go back to the history, it's just so telling. Right?
Yeah, it really is. And you start to see a picture of a church that does not look at all like your church. Although I think one of my favorite lines from Deacon Alex when he was on the journey home, I think it was the last time he was on the journey home before he passed, he said, when I went through, and was catechizing my congregation, I talked to them about the early church, and then I talked about Mary. Then I talked to them about the Eucharist, and then I talked to them about Mary a little bit more. Then I talked to them about the papacy, and then I talked to them about Mary a little bit more. So I think that was like one of the biggest hurdles that he had to come through with some of the people that he was talking to and working with. But it all worked out.
Do you think, from your perspective as a convert, and we mentioned this morning too, that the saints Carlo and also Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati, Blessed Carlo Acutis will be saints, the canonization is September 7th now. Do Protestants look at that at all and say, well, who are these guys and what does a saint mean? Because these two young men, I think it's so cool because you've got one from the 21st century and then one from the 20th century, but they're very similar in terms of their family background and their love of the Eucharist. There's a lot of similarities. One was from Torino, one was from Milan. They're both from northern Italy, and their family background, again, is very similar. Do they pay attention to that when they see the stories? Because those stories, there's a lot of stories out there. The secular media are covering these two canonizations.
Yeah, I hope that more people do. I think it is sort of like a weird thing for Protestants to look at a saint who is not like a plaster statue over in the corner of some medieval dude with a big beard. You do hope that gets the attention. But I think one of the things that will get the attention of the world, and this is not just evangelicals and the secular media, but I hope it gets the attention of Catholics as well, is that it's one thing for them to be faithful Christians who went to Mass, and took advantage of the sacramental life and everything it had to offer. But these are people who served. They went out of their way to see the face of God, and people who were kind of looked over by society. And I think in a world where everything is so focused on image and consumerism, to think, here's good-looking kids, strong, smart people who are willing to go and leave the pack and go help the needy and the less fortunate. That's a big deal.
It's like the gospel yesterday, seeing our eyes open to help people and to make a difference. Matt, always great to catch up with you. Tune into the Journey Home tonight, or you can listen, of course, also on Catholic Radio here on EWTN. We'll be right back. What an honor and a blessing it is to talk about the contributions of an amazing Vietnamese church leader, Francis-Xavier Cardinal Nguyen Van Thuan, chronicling his legacy and his priesthood and 13-year imprisonment by the Vietnamese communist. Wow, 9 of those years in solitary confinement. His sister is on the phone with us this morning, Elisabeth. Elisabeth, what an honor. Thank you for your time. First of all, Just what does it mean to you to be able to talk about your brother in terms of his contribution? He suffered so much, and yet he never lost his faith. I love reading his reflections that the Magnificat publishes quite often. What does it mean to you to look at his life? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you for having me on this show. It is very important for us to really talk about his spirituality after so many years, because before we were kind of shy and said that it's up to him to write and to go and preach and give and share with his experience. But then as we approached the Jubilee year, Father Leclerc and myself, we remembered that 50 years ago, the Jubilee year on 1975, that was when he was imprisoned, and that was when he started his first book on hope. It's called The Road of Hope. So this year marked the 50th anniversary of the birth of that book. And on that book, The Road of Hope, his message is, despite all the darkness that blind us because of all the problems of this world that so often make us feel absolutely desperate, and we lose a sight of hope, and we lose a sight of God's salvation. And so he decided to write those meditations when he started his prison life. And so today, 50 years later, we believe that the spirituality and the message of hope needs to be again redistributed or given to our brothers and sisters in the world when we are going through such turbulent times.
You said something interesting, that you said you always thought it was in the family and friends thought it was up to him to preach the truth, obviously because he was religious and such an amazing witness. But I think he must have impressed upon you that we're all called to evangelize, right, by virtue of our baptism. It's not just for those who are clerics, those who are sisters or priests or bishops or cardinals. It's all of us have a responsibility.
Exactly, Teresa. We were kind of shy because he's a brother. So we kind of said, nah, we're not going to, talk so much about our own family. So we were kind of shy about that. But I remember back in the 1998, my mother, after the funeral of my dad, my mother and him visited Rome. And then my mother said to him, Francis, I think your experience is not just for a small group. Your experience about the presence of God in your life and about how much the hope and God has touched you in such time of darkness has to be worldwide. And so after the death of my mother, we as a family really thought that, we should really do something about that. And so, as you said, we recognize that it is our responsibility as the person who continue to do that. And we prayed a lot for that courage to write, because it does bring up own wounds. And sometimes it's spiritually, it makes us going through those dark times and go back to that kind of feeling of anger or asking questions, why? But then we prayed, and we were able to pick up the courage to rewrite that the message of his life.
How did you decide what to put in the book? Because he had so many reflections and so much amazing material. I mean, it definitely a Romans 8:28 situation. All things work together for good. Treated so unfairly and cruelly and harshly, but so much fruit that came out of that time in prison, especially in solitary confinement. So there must have been a lot of material to work with, right?
Yes, there is a lot of material. but I focus only on one of his answers to the press. And so I continue that line. When he was liberated, and so there are many media waiting for him to ask him, so Bishop, what is the secret weapon, really, that helped you survive all these years? And so he just simply smiled, and he said, I really don't have any secret weapon. The very big weapon, I wouldn't call weapon, but he said the secret of my power is Jesus in the Eucharist. And so last year on the Eucharist Congress in Minneapolis, we knew that that was really something that we did and that we were very comfortable with what we did in the book. And that's when we decided that, we should really seek for a publishing company to publish it for us. And thank God, Ignatius Press took up that job for us. And it was really the focus on the power of the Eucharist that really propelled us to write about that experience.
So what has been the response so far to the book, Elisabeth?
Because Father Leclerc and myself wrote it in French originally. So from French, it was right away published in, translated in Dutch language, Spanish, and Vietnamese and German. And the response was so overwhelming from Europe and from Vietnam that we decided that, the big church in North America or other countries who use the English language needs to have this book. And that's when we decided to ask around and Ignatius Press. And I think so far as I have heard, the response was very well.
Yeah. Well, it's so powerful. As I said, I love reading his reflections in the Magnificat. They're so deep. And you can either, when you go through suffering, and I know you know this from your brother, but when you go through suffering, you can either, I'm going to try to learn something from this, I'm going to try to grow from this, or I'm going to allow myself to get very angry and very bitter and let that take over. And I'm sure your brother struggled. He's human, right? I mean, I'm sure he had his moments, especially in solitary confinement. But his love of God and his knowledge and what he gained in that time with the Lord just was so, so clear. We're going to talk more with Elisabeth Nguyen about her brother and, of course, the beautiful book all about his life, and we'll tell you how to get the book as well. Ignatius published it. More details coming up, and we appreciate the time with Elisabeth. Stay tuned. Having a beautiful conversation with the sister of Cardinal Nguyen Van Thuan about the book she co-wrote. Gorgeous book, and the cover of her brother, that picture is just stunning, of him, his eyes closed in prayer and clutching a crucifix, clutching a cross, just so beautiful. A man of joy and hope. And Elisabeth, his life, what was it like? I mean, now he's, of course, a servant of God, and hopefully someday will be a saint, will be canonized. What was it like growing up with someone? He must have had a very strong faith from a very early time in his life. What was he like as a young boy?
Well, as I said, I'm the last kid in the family. So my brother, who is the eldest, has always been for me like a mini dad. So he often babysat me a lot. And growing up, I often asked him many questions. And later on, after he left prison, and one day when I was visiting him, and he said, "Hey, Elisabeth, you remember you always asked me where is God and did I see God and all of these questions as a child?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "So do you still want to see God as you wanted as a baby? And I said, oh, yes, I'm always wondering what is the face of God. And he said, you know, I too was always looking for the face of God, and I long to see the face of God when I die. But in prison, I saw the face of crucified God in the fellow prisoners, in the jailers, and in the suffering of humanity. I saw the face of crucified God.
Wow.
And that really has really touched me. So one day I was having a difficulty at work, and I confided to him, and he said, you know, Elisabeth, look at all the challenges in life, all the sufferings in humanity in the world, and you can recognize and almost touch the crucified God, because that's on that cross, that's all the suffering of humanity that he carried on him. And so he made himself full of this suffering so that we can be reconciled with the God the Father. So that really touched me and helped me a lot to help to really relate that message to other people, that, you know, in all of our suffering, he's there, that his face. And so let's embrace him and do something with him and unite with him.
There are some beautiful endorsements, including one from Cardinal Timothy Dolan. The Cardinal, whom I was honored to know, he says, was a priest and bishop deeply in love with Jesus and his church. He suffered greatly for his faith during years of imprisonment and mistreatment by his communist captors. The inspiring biography captures his willingness, though, to forgive those who hurt him as he recognized them as children of God, made in his image. His story deserves to be more widely known, and the co-authors do an admirable job in helping to accomplish that goal. And then Monsignor Roger Landry, a man of faith, sincerity, suffering, joy, and hope. The Cardinal is one of the most inspiring Catholic figures in recent centuries, which is why 3 popes have urged the faithful to learn from his heroic example and profound wisdom. Having had the privilege to know him, I am deeply moved by this book, which will give everyone a chance to know him, to be strengthened by his virtues, and hopefully to be encouraged to seek his powerful intercession. And you know, Elisabeth, I think the timing of this, God's timing is always perfect. So many people, especially here in the United States, are struggling. They're struggling with loneliness. They're struggling with even though we have so much in this country, just not being happy, not being fulfilled, and wondering the meaning of life. And you think of how lonely your brother must have been. And he can just offer so much encouragement, don't you think, to a society, to a world that's so hurting right now?
Yes, and that's why I'm thinking of, in this book, the history of the suffering of my own family as well as our people during that long period of time, can offer an example and an experience of God's presence with us and how he fortified us, and we still holding very strongly faithful with the teaching of the church and completely in communion with the universal church. And that should be and must be, and I hope it is, a very good experience to kind of give courage to other people, like you said. And I like to add also that if anybody who has read the book, the Testimony of Hope, which is the Lenten retreat that he preached to the Roman Curia in the Jubilee year of 2000, then you can recognize that he already started to talk about the social doctrine of the church, that now Pope Leo is really on very actively talking about that. And so, you know, it is really a happiness for me and for my people to say that we hope that our experience, and as we become immigrant in North America, our experience of faith has helped build up the community in North America.
And what about the community back in Vietnam? What impact did he and does he still have, do you think, Elisabeth?
It is a very good dialogue now between the Vatican and the Church, because now we finally have a permanent nuncio, a representative of the Vatican inside Vietnam. We never had it after 75. And this year, we finally have a permanent one. And surprisingly, wherever he was in prison, the years that he spent in North Vietnam, in Yang Sa, where he was under house arrest, now it has become a memorial center where thousands of pilgrims arrive each day to pray. And especially this year, because it is the 50th anniversary of the Book of Hope, the Road of Hope. He started to write in 1975, the Jubilee year, and now 50 years after, another Jubilee year. And so all the pilgrims are starting to go back there and to remember the message of hope in God. And I really am so thrilled to see that my son and his family went to Vietnam last Christmas. And they went to that memorial service, a memorial house that is the house where he was kept under house arrest. And my son said, "Oh, Mom, I was so emotional because where Uncle suffered has become now a place for people to go and pray and renew their courage and their faith in God."
Wow. Wow, that gives me the chills. It must give you the chills, too. How do you think he was able to, and when did that happen, the forgiveness factor with his captors? Because he saw them as children of God, as Cardinal Dolan said in his endorsement. But was that a process for him, or because of his strength in God, was he able to do that quickly? What do you think? What do you know about what he went through with the forgiveness?
I think he went through darkness of soul for quite some time, a few long months. But finally, he said that at nighttime, he, in total despair, he asked God, what is it that you want me to do, and what is it that you put me here for? And a voice of God and say, you still have a big treasure in your heart, is the love of God. Give it to your neighbor, to the one that you see, and you will restore that strength in you. And that's when he started to look at Jesus first crucified in the neighbor, which is the prisoner and the jailer. And he said, that's when I really find that, yes, Jesus suffers in everyone, including my enemy, and I need to renew that love between me and my neighbor, to renew that union with God. And that's when he started to really forgive and start to love them again. And I think it is a process that come out from deep suffering and really a big despair and a darkness of soul for many months in the isolation cell.
How did you decide on the photograph on the front of the book? Because it just seems to capture his spirituality, because there's such a sense of peace about that photo with his eyes closed, holding the cross. Yeah.
The photo was taken by an British journalist who interviewed him years ago, and he gave us permission to use it over the years. And I absolutely think that it is the mystery of the cross, the power and the glory of the cross, that really the center of our faith, and the power of our faith is the risen Lord through the cross. And so we decided that, we proclaim Jesus crucified and the resurrection in glory, and that's when we decided that photo is really appropriate for his spirituality.
Right. Well, what I get from it, and I'm sure others will too, if they have the book or even if they go online at ignatius.com and look it up, is you see this man and you see this look. If you don't know who he is and what he went through, if you look at his face, it's so peaceful. There's just a little hint of a smile there. His eyes are closed. He looks very relaxed, very peaceful, and he has the cross held, in his hand to his mouth. It looks like he's about to kiss the cross. And so looking at this picture, you wouldn't automatically think, Elisabeth, that this is someone who had so much, my goodness, was treated so badly and was imprisoned and it was just horrible what he went through, especially solitary confinement. But what you see is the peace of God. A peace on his face is just so obvious.
Yes. And after prison, people asked me, one of the person who asked me, why do you think he is called a hero? And I said, I wouldn't use the word hero at all. I would say that it's a man profoundly, deeply touched by God. And if you are touched by God, obviously you are full of peace and joy. And that's why you so rightly say that that picture really gives us a sense of peaceful, of serenity, and completely trusting in God. Nothing can go wrong, and that picture does give us that feeling. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on this beautiful book, and we continue to pray for your family and for all of us to learn from your amazing brother. The book is published by our friends at Ignatius Press, ignatius.com, and we've been talking with the sister of Cardinal Nguyen Van Thuan. The book is Cardinal Nguyen Van Thuan, Man of Joy and Hope, and it can be found on the Ignatius website. We'll also put it up, of course. I'm sure it's available in the EWTN Religious Catalog. Elisabeth, God bless you. Thank you for spending extra time with us this morning. And I just am so happy that this book is here for us in English and we can learn more about your brother and his spirituality. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome, sweetheart. God bless you and your family. And we'll be right back to let you know what's coming up in the next hour of Catholic Connection. Wow, what a story. Cardinal Nguyen Van Thuan, Man of Joy and Hope, brand new book from Ignatius Press. We'll be right back. Thanks so much for tuning in to the first hour of Catholic Connection here on a Monday, July 14th, 2025. Tom Price and I were just talking during the break about, you hear about a witness like that, like the Cardinal, and the suffering that he went through and the forgiveness factor. And we have no clue in terms of we have to learn so much about forgiveness. And sometimes we get so mad at somebody for the smallest of things and hold a grudge. And wow, what a lesson we can learn from him. And oh my gosh, what a book, what a testimony. And it was great spending time with Elisabeth. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Coming up in the second hour of the program, in our 2 cents segment, I heard the most beautiful homily yesterday from our associate pastor, Father Bob, at St. Joan of Arc, my parish in Metro Detroit. A little bit of a twist on the understanding of the gospel regarding the Good Samaritan. And I never thought about this before. And see, this is what I love so much about Scripture, because it's always alive. It is alive, and it's always giving us more and more. And the next time you go back to a reading that you've read maybe 100 times, especially growing up Catholic, right? We hear the gospel of the Good Samaritan quite frequently, and probably heard it many, many times over the years. But you can always get something new from Scripture, because God is always teaching us with that. So we'll talk about that particular homily that I heard yesterday, and very similar, by the way, to what the Pope said yesterday about the Good Samaritan. Very similar notes. And I don't think Father Bob was copying from the Pope, because it was happening at the same, basically later than the Pope spoke. But anyway, we'll talk about that. And also we will talk about the latest in the floods and what's being done to help people in Texas, and a mom's perspective on how to help children cope with that tragedy from our own Deborah Cowden, who wrote a beautiful piece on the National Catholic Register. All that coming up on EWTN Radio Extra. Stay tuned.